So this is the first webinar of this 2024 and 25 from the diet and caring with colors. So this is an activity, or this module is based on the LO from NAS and as well as the DSCRT. So these activities, so you can inculcate these activities in your work, classroom, transaction, so that the teachers can transact effectively and the students can learn effectively. I request all the teachers to attend the pre-test and also the webinar post-test and everything. So if you have any doubts, means you can also clarify, or you can, if you need any other type of activities also, you can ask here in this group. So this webinar is not only for the English teachers. Overall, the teachers in English other than the English teachers. So welcome once again. I welcome to this webinar.
Thank you, Madam Asma. Good afternoon, all teachers. We welcome you to the first Shikshana Sambrama webinar of this year, 2024 and 2025. Here we are gathered today to discuss and participate in the first module of the year. All of us English teachers, if you have been with us the last year and the year before, we all know that our one major goal has always been about creating an English environment for our learners in the classroom. Just like last year, we all are here again, going to continue that goal of ours in enhancing that English environment in our classrooms. And in order to achieve that, there are some major checkpoints that we will have to conquer. Let us look at some objectives that these modules bring to us. We begin by understanding that teaching English experientially is possible. Not only is it possible, but it can be done effectively too. And to help us realize this, these modules will provide us with resources that are created and curated meticulously for the teachers of second language English. Utilizing these available resources, we all teachers will try to address the language skills and facilitate them in our classrooms, which are listening, speaking, reading, writing, and thinking. So as I was saying, our main checkpoints that we will keep for ourselves, just like we have the main goal of creating the English environment in our classrooms, we will try to understand that teaching English experientially is possible. And not only is it possible, but it can also be done effectively using the resources that we have created and curated for all of you. We will, in time, wherever and whenever possible, will inform you about the resources that you can use and the sources that you can access those from. Along with that, we will also try to bring in or address the language skills of listening, speaking, reading, writing, and thinking, not to forget the aspect of thinking, and how can that be brought in experientially. All these objectives help us facilitate the learning outcomes that we all strive for, that all our textbooks also help us address. So these all activities that we discuss and the activities that are provided as resources will help all teachers address and cover the DSCRT learning outcomes for the grades of 4, 5, grade 6, and grade 7. Along with the DSCRT learning outcomes, we are also continuing to address the learning outcomes from National Achievement Survey 2. When we teach something in the classroom, we are always trying to achieve a learning outcome. Now that we are all here in this co-learning space called Shikshana Sambrama, let us all set some simple goals for ourselves so that we make sure that our learning is all going towards that direction. So the first goal that we have put for ourselves, or that we are putting for ourselves, is to participate and engage in all the activities and elements of each of these modules. And we'll also try to enhance our own subject matter expertise and our pedagogical understanding of teaching English. And we'll try to do that with an intention of getting to know more ideas on how to teach English experientially. We will also explore the resources that will be provided to you either through the module directly or after the module as resources. Along with that, a major task that we can put for ourselves is that we will definitely participate in all the activities. We will discuss and listen to all the activities, but we will also go back and transact those activities in the classrooms. We will try to conduct those activities and experience how effective those activities are, and if there are any modifications that we will have to do for our own classrooms. So remember, teachers, modifying an activity that you see here that we all discuss together, or that is provided to you as a resource through our platform of Teachopia, can be taken up and must and should be modified to your customized needs of your classroom and your students. You are free to do that, and that autonomy has always been with you all to modify an activity and also create your own activity. Now, I had told you about the NAS learning outcome, or the National Achievement Survey learning outcome, along with the DACRT learning outcomes that we have kept as something that are all of our modules address. So let us try to understand what this National Achievement Survey is all about. National Achievement Survey is a center-led examination, if you can call it, or a survey that the nation does to assess the learning standards in the grades of 3, 5, and 8, and 10 students. So for our context, we are considering the grades of 5 and 8, and let us try to address those specific grades and the learning outcomes that NAS has put forward for us in with respect to language, and see how we can try to address the NAS learning outcome for these specific grades, including grade 4 and including grade 7 for ourselves. So NAS survey or NAS exam happens in the subjects of language, mathematics, and science. Now, when it comes to language, which happened, the previous examination, NAS exam, happened in 2021, and it was found that only around 57% of all students in our district, and around the same number of 57% of students in the whole state of Karnataka are able to read something and comprehend. The number is very close, even in grade 8, where there is only 47% of students in our district and 52% across Karnataka that are able to read and comprehend something. So when I say read and comprehend, NAS was very clear on conducting the conducting the whole examination on specific learning outcomes for grade 5 and 8. For grade 5, as you can see on your screens, the learning outcome from NAS was targeted towards reads text with comprehension, locates details, and sequence of events. For grade 8, it was reads textual, non-textual materials with comprehension and identifies the details characters, main ideas, and sequence of ideas and events while reading. So because there is more than 50% of the students who need our help, who need extra attention on gaining this capacity or gaining the skill or gaining the competency of reading and understanding something, or reading and comprehension as we know it. Let us try to use these modules and all the activities and even the platform to share resources, to access resources, and to access and share activities and strategies that help us address this very basic learning outcome of reading and comprehending a piece of text, and along with addressing our own DSCRT learning outcomes that we do through every chapter and every prose and poetry that we do in our classrooms. Having said that, let's also glance at the DSCRT learning outcomes, that all the activities that we speak here, along with the activities that will be provided to you after the webinar as resources, will address in grade 4, grade 5, grade 6, and grade 7. These are the list of learning outcomes. The list is quite long, and I will not spend the time reading through all the learning outcomes. I request all teachers to read through the learning outcomes at their own time once they you get access to this slide later on. And also, whenever an activity is discussed with you, we will make sure to mention the learning outcome that that activity addresses directly. So I request all teachers to pay extra care and attention to this slide, because this slide has the list of experiential elements that each of us will discuss about in each Shikshana Sambrama webinar that we attend starting from today. For the month of July, which is this Shikshana Sambrama webinar, our theme of the day or theme of the whole webinar will be centered around the concepts of exposure and forming connections. In the next month, we will look at the experiential elements like practice and assistance. In September, we will talk about constructive feedback, how the teachers can give constructive feedback to the learners at what intervals and during their learning process. In the November, we'll talk about the element of collaboration between the students and with the teacher. Next webinar, which will be on December, will focus on the element of reflection. And in January, we'll try to create an experiential activity of our own using a template that we will discuss then. And in the February, in the February webinar, which will be the last webinar for that year, for this year, we will try to recap all the tools and techniques that we have been discussing. And we will also be sharing every activity that we create on our own, taking cues and taking help from all the activities that we will discuss till then. Now, let's begin talking about this webinar, and let us see how this webinar is going to help us directly in our classrooms tomorrow. So for this webinar, in this webinar, you will find activities related to these lessons that you see on your screens. I'm sure some teachers might be either too ahead or a little behind the calendar of teaching the chapters, which is completely fine. But assuming that these are the first couple of chapters in every grade, and if you have already done these chapters or already have covered the whole activities in the chapters, if you're done with the prose and the poetries, you can always try to integrate or select one activity and try to do it again in your classroom, so that you can test on which strategy works better for your students. and that will be like a feedback for you, or that will help you analyze what works better for your students contextually. For grade 4 and 5, these are the chapters, and these are the specific activities that you see on your right-hand side of your screen, which are picked from the lesson plans, which are created for these chapters that you see on your screens, which you can find on Teachopia. Again, for these chapters in grade 6 and 7, these specific activities have been chosen to be discussed here with you all, but you can find more activities just like these, and even activities that are in continuation to the activities which we are going to discuss, or activities that come before the activities that we have in this module can also be accessed on Teachopia. With all that discussed and with all that overview of the framework of the whole module and the whole program, dear teachers, let us start discussing on this first module of ours. In this module, let us start our discussions on the activities and the strategies by brushing up our memory of the language learning cycle that we all had discussed in the last year. In the last year, we had discussed with you and we had proposed a 4-stage learning cycle that each language learner in our classrooms goes through. If you remember, all teachers, we had begun with the stage of exposure. This is a stage where the teacher, whatever the teacher speaks, every material that the teacher provides to the student, every activity, introductory activity that the teacher does to introduce a concept acts as an exposure to the child. In this phase, the teacher provides a safe and calm environment for the student to gain information, gain knowledge, and gain inputs from the teacher in the language of our selection, in this case, English. Next comes the stage of forming connections. In this stage of forming connections, the child is trying to connect what the teacher has given him or her, whatever he or she has listened from the teacher, whatever he or she has read and heard from the materials that the teacher has provided, and it is trying to connect it with its own previous knowledge, with its own contextual knowledge, and connecting the two and creating an understanding of its own with regards to English. It is making meaning in this stage. So the process of meaning making happens using its own prior knowledge and using the inputs given by the teacher. Then comes the stage of trial and practice, or trying and practice. So what does the student do in this stage? The student tries to reproduce English based on its understanding, based on its experience of what he or she has gained in the stages of exposure and in the stage of forming connections majorly. This is a place where the teacher has to provide a very conducive environment so that the student tries reproducing English, or tries to speak in English, or tries to use English either in speech or even in writing without any fear. Then the stage continues to when the student starts trying and practicing speaking English or writing English, it moves into the stage of assistance and clarity, where now the teacher and the student collaboratively work on improving what the student is reproducing when it comes to language. So whatever the teacher and the student do in the phase of assistance and clarity, all the additional inputs that the teacher provides, all the corrections that the teacher does to the errors of the student, or any extra material that the teacher might provide to help the student enhance his or her reproduction of language, acts again as an input and acts again as an exposure for the student. And thus, the child continues to venture through these 4 stages on and off whenever the teacher provides the ample opportunities and the path for. Now, teachers, let's get into discussing some activities for each of the grades of 4, grade 5, grade 6, and grade 7. We have one activity from each of the grades where we request all teachers to think and explore what are the possibilities in which you can modify the activity and you can create your own activity based on the template or based on the idea that each of these activities come with. For grade 4, the first activity that we are talking about will address the learning outcomes, as I had mentioned to you all teachers, the DSERT learning outcomes of a response to simple instructions and announcements in English made in either the class or the school. Infers the meaning of unfamiliar words by reading them in context. Then reads printed script on the classroom walls, notice board, or in posters or in advertisements. So these are the learning outcomes, and let's look at how a teacher is preparing for an activity and conducting an activity for her students of grade 4. So here is our teacher who is preparing for an activity for the chapter of household articles. She is trying to bring in some her own original ideas along with teaching the topic of household articles with some WH question words as well. Household articles are articles or objects that we use every day in our houses, and the teacher is trying to merge that concept of household articles, of identifying household articles and their use, with the concept of WH questions. It is essential for the students to learn WH questions, so why not merge it with the another concept and into a fun activity?
For this activity, we need pictures of household items. I have picked pictures of a bed, toothbrush, gas stove, a table fan, and television. You can use printed images or draw them by hand. To conduct this activity, you also need some cello tape and chalk. Let's display all the individual flashcards side by side on the board. Use tape to stick the pictures to the board so that we can easily remove them later. Give time to all learners to go through the flashcards. Do not read the names of the objects. Let the learners have a glance. Make 4 to 6 groups based on the number of learners in the class. If learners are sitting on desks and benches, then the learners sitting on 2 benches can form one group. Now, take a piece of chalk and draw the blueprint of a house with at least 4 rooms on the classroom floor. You can draw a living room, bedroom, bathroom, and kitchen. Make sure each room is labeled. Depending on the number of students in the class, form groups of 3 or 4. Allow the students time to look through the pictures. Don't read out the names of the objects. Just let the students take a glance at them. Introduce WH questions to the students through actions.
Ask the first group questions. I want to sleep, and show the sleeping action. The teacher will then say, what do I need? And point at the pictures. Ask group 1 to answer the question by glancing through the flashcards and identifying the right article or thing to accomplish the task. Let the group identify the household thing. Ask one of the group members to come forward and pick the flashcard. Ask one of the group members to come forward and pick the flashcard. Once the learners pick the right household article, in this case, the flashcard of a bed, let him hand it over. Use the article or household object to do the task. Then the teacher can ask, where should I place it in the house? Students would say, in the bedroom. Let the learners respond to the WH questions asked and hand over the right flashcards. The teacher can ask, shall I put it here? I am placing the bed in the bedroom. Proceed with the same pattern for all other actions like brushing, cooking a meal, turning on the fan, watching TV, etc. Make sure to use WH questions in all of your questions. Now the teacher can ask, what am I doing? The teacher does the action of brushing her teeth. So the students reply, brushing. The teacher says, yes, I am brushing. Which household article do I need to brush my teeth? And the students reply, toothbrush. Where would the toothbrush be? Asks the teacher. And the students say, bathroom. Continue the activity until all the objects are placed in their appropriate rooms. You can then ask reflective questions to stimulate the learners. Some questions are, why are the items inside the kitchen, bedroom, or living room at your house placed in that specific room? Why should those things be placed only there?
Here is a reminder for all of you. I hope you all paid attention to that activity. While you all were listening to that activity, try to answer to these questions that you must have received even on your WhatsApp groups, or you can just refer questions on your screen right now. Try to ask yourself, what is my understanding of the language learning phase of exposure and forming connections? Ask this question to yourself, and you can answer or write down your answers in your own in a notebook or a piece of paper near you. We will ask you to share your responses later on. Please do not share your responses immediately. You will be asked to share your responses either at the end of this webinar or after the webinar. The next question that you all will be asking yourself, or the next task that you will be making sure that you do, is identify the parts of every activity that you see here being discussed and try to find the element of exposure and forming connections. And if you can find those elements of exposure and forming connections, ask yourself if you can improve this activity by adding more elements, more places, or more activity sections, or more items or things within the activity, more processes within the activity to increase the element or increase the exposure and the stage of forming connection in each of the activities. And remember, after listening to or looking at all these activities, our last assignment after the webinar will be to create our own activity. You are free to choose any concept that you want, The concept can be a grammatical concept, or it can be a value, like let's say respect towards nature, respect towards elder or families, or values like bravery, empathy that you have in your chapters of prose and poetry. Or it can be any item or any learning outcome that of your choice, and then try to bring in the element of exposure and forming connections and create a new activity. It can be uh, from the ideas that are being discussed here, or it can be your own original idea. But creating a new activity is a welcome move. We will let you know where to share your activities. It can be either in the WhatsApp groups, or you will be informed on when and where you will have to share those activities. But this is something that you will do after the webinar. So for now, let's continue with grade 5, and let's look at what activity does grade 5 have for us.
The learning outcomes for grade 5 are answers coherently in written or oral form to questions in English based on day-to-day life experiences, unfamiliar stories, and poems heard or read. Recites and shares English songs, poems, games, riddles, stories, tongue twisters, etc. Recites and shares them with peers and family members. The first activity is called I Like to Play. We begin the session by declaring that today we will be discussing only games. We will play a lot of games as well. If you have any books open on your desk, close them and keep them in your bags. Once these instructions are given to your students, you can start. You can expect them to tell you the names of groups or team names and the individual games they play or once played. Allow them to explain how each game is played, including its rules. Let them share their experiences playing those games. Broadly categorize those games by asking, which are those games that are played using natural things around us? Which are the games that require equipment or items to be made? When the learners share about the games, write the names of the games played around trees or on trees on the board. Then talk to them about the following. How will you feel if you find out that the tree you played with has been cut down? Something like that has happened in the poem we will read today. Briefly discuss what they would feel if something like that happened to them so that this topic can be connected to the theme of the poem. Take up the poem and read the stanzas with appropriate intonation and gestures. Ask the learners to share what they understood from this poem recitation session.
And here is a sample recitation that you all can use in the classrooms, teachers, or you can take cues from this, encouraged by this. You can also read in the same manner suggested in this video.
A poetry called Tamarind. Nobody knows where my tamarind stood, just by a winding lane. Each year it gave me fruit and shade and drew me to my home again. I love to sit beneath her shady boughs and rest up for a while, to gaze out upon the distant blue hills with laughter and a smile. And now that I'm back, I'm eager to find my tamarind again. I hasten down to that favorite spot. I search, but search in vain. Then I stop and I stare I stand quite still. I listen to my heart. That magnificent tree that was my life has just been ripped apart. I turn to the hills, my eyes filled with tears. For sure, I've lost my soul. Where once it stood tall, there's nothing there now, merely an empty hole.
Let's move on to the next activity idea, and this one's called Dishum Dishum. The objective is to explore and discuss defense mechanisms in animals and understand that every living being has a right to live and will defend for its survival. Use a painting that is done by the child of various animals, and you may use this to use as an example instead of. So now we can introduce the students to this table, which has been divided into prey and predators. So they play a game where one of the learners will become an animal, that is the prey, and the other will become the predator. Whoever is the prey must defend themselves against another animal who's the predator. Start with the first animal, frog. Say, now one of you is a frog and must defend yourself from a huge, hungry snake. Another learner, explain. Think of how you can defend yourself against the snake. For this activity, you may go through a few of the reflective questions with the students. After the activity is conducted, we must always allow the students to reflect on their learning. Such a reflection and summarization of the learning happens when you ask reflective questions. You can ask questions like, what are your thoughts about taming wild animals? How different or similar are we in our defense mechanisms? Do you think that all living things should be allowed to defend themselves? Justify your response. First, we display the piece of art, images that the children create during their sessions in the classroom, which are connected to the environment. Reflective questions that you could use for this activity are, why do you think we should recycle? How does it help the environment? Can all items be recycled? Can plastic be recycled?
With that, we move to grade 6 activities. The activity name is Let's Play a Game. The learning outcomes for this activity are participates in activities in English like role play, group discussion, debate, and more. A response to a variety of questions on familiar and unfamiliar texts, both verbally and in writing. A response to announcements and instructions made either in the classroom, school assembly, railway station, and other public places. The teacher starts the session by telling the learners, today we will be preparing some materials that we will require to stage a play. And to conduct this activity, you will have to prepare some chits. So the chits will contain the different roles that each of the learners will play in the role play. Here is the prose of our target, which is how do bees make honey? So the teacher is going to plan a role play around this chapter of how do bees make honey. For this lesson, we can stage a play where learners play different roles in the process of making honey. The chits would contain some roles like honeybees, a flower, beehive, a honeycomb, and so on. Like I said, a flower, a honeybees, different honeybees, a roll of a beehive, and a roll of a honeycomb. Now, divide the class into 3 groups. Elect a representative for each of the group and give them the following instructions. I want the representatives from each group to come forward and pick one chit from this bowl. The students or the representatives from each of the groups will come forward and pick their chits. Once they come and pick their chits and pick their roles that their group will be playing, ask them to collect the props or the materials required for them to play the roles according to the theme of their roles. For example, tell the learners if the chit contains honeybees, draw a pair of wings, color it, and cut it. Punch holes and tie threads to the end of the wings so that they can be tied to your back during the play. So here, if this girl as a representative has got the role of a honeybee, their team will create a pair of wings that they can tie to their backs, and they will create the props that are required for them all to play that role. Like this, in the same way, guide all the groups to create their own props or materials that they will need to play the roles that they have got in their teams. Like the teams of honeycomb will create honeycombs. The teams where they have got flowers as the role will create paper flowers. And the team honeybees will create a pair of wings for each of them, and with a thread to tie it on their backs and pretend or play the role of honeybees. Once the learners have completed the creation of the props, call a few learners and tell them that the process of making honey. Tell them tomorrow all of us will stage a play and narrating of the story, A Day with Mr. B and his family. And Mr. B is an imaginary character that you can create yourself. The next day, start the session by giving some time to place the props prepared by the learners the previous day. Take up the imaginary character of Mr. B and narrate the lesson as a day in the life of honeybees. While you narrate the chapter or the story, let the selected learners who are staging the play act accordingly. Once the children start playing the roles, you can keep asking questions like, what does Mr. B do every day? After collecting the nectar, what did Mr. B do? Did you find any similarities between the story that I told you and your friends that enacted and the lesson that we just read out? In this way, the students are able to not only play the roles of honeybees, the flower, and the honeycomb, they also get used to the process, the sequential process of bees making honey, and they will connect that to the chapter that the teacher reads in front of them. Now we move to an activity from grade 7. Here is an activity for grade 7 with the learning outcomes of reads to seek information either in print or online or from notice boards, signboards, which are there in public places, newspapers or hoardings, and more. Response to different kinds of instructions or requests and directions in varied contexts. Answers to questions either orally or in writing on variety of texts. We begin the activity by creating a bowl of chits once again, but this time the chits will have some words in them. Try to write a variety of words in each of the chits, but make sure that most of the words have some one or more silent letters in them. So you're writing words which have silent letters in them. Once that is done, ask the students to pick one chit for themselves. For example, here is a child who has picked a chit with the word knife in it. And as we all know, there is one silent letter in this word. But we will let the learners figure that out on their own. Select 4 learners to play this game. Draw a simple triangle in the middle of the classroom on the floor. Ask one learner to stand in the middle and blindfold that learner so that the child is not able to see but is able to hear. Ask all the other 3 learners to stand in the edges of the triangle or one of the sides of the triangle as a triangle, as the shape. Once the 4 learners are in their places, ask the learners who are standing on the edges of the triangle to start saying the words that they have picked from the chit loudly. In this case, the words like knife, kite, and kitten will be called out loudly by each of the learners, one after the other. The person in the middle or the learner in the middle will intently listen to each of these words and try to figure out in which direction or from which direction is a word coming at him which has a silent letter in it. Then the learner points in that direction and points out that the word coming from this direction, which is knife, has a silent letter in it. In the same way, now the learners can shift places or swap places and continue playing that activity, making sure that all learners get the opportunity to play this game and identify silent letters. So that was the activity, teachers, for grades 4, grades 5, grade 6, and grade 7. Let us now, as I had promised you earlier, we are not only discussing ideas and activities in this module, but we'll also see what can we do more than what we discuss here. So to do that, we are again going to look at some resources. So the resources that you see on your screens are a representation of a document that you all will receive post the webinar. In that document, you will find QR codes that you can either scan using another mobile phone, or you can click on the QR codes directly to access these resources. What will these resources give you? These QR codes will give you lesson plans for each of the chapter, each of the prose, each poetry from grades 4, grades 5, grades 6 and 7. Not only lesson plans, but you will also find worksheets which you can use to assess or explore the concepts for each of the chapters of prose and poetry. Along with that, you will also find project-based modules. Project-based modules, as some of you might already know, are simple activities, simple documents that the students can read on their own and do that activity either in the classroom or in their house without the assistance of any parent or the teacher, which is not required or necessary for this project-based module, and they will continue their learning. And teachers, reminding you again that this document will be shared with you on the respective WhatsApp groups, which you can open and click the links, click the QR codes directly to access the file or the kind of file that you want. It can be a lesson plan, worksheet, project-based module, or you can explore through Teachopia and figure out what you want. Let us see how you can access resources from Teachopia. On Teachopia, you also you have prose and poetry covered. So if you are looking for a chapter from prose, you open Teachopia, you will be greeted by the home screen or the dashboard, where under the tab of content below on your screen, you can click on the content button on the bottom of your screen, which will give you access to the selection of grades. You can select the grade appropriately as per your requirements, and then select the subject that you want it in. In this case, we are clicking on English. Once we do that, you will be greeted with all the chapters for that grade that you have selected. In this case, we have selected grade 7 English. So all the chapters, may it be prose or poetry, will appear on your screen, to which you can just click on the chapter, for example, the Wonder Bowl, and you will have access to chunk 1, chunk 2, chunk 3. Remember, teachers, chunk 1, chunk 2, chunk 3s are nothing but lesson plans split into smaller activities so that you can do chunk 1 in one class, chunk 2 in the next class, chunk 3 in the next class. So one period at a time, you can cover all the lesson plans that you see on Teachopia. Along with that, you can also use additional resources like explainer videos, which will be a narration of prose and a recitation of a poetry, or even documents that you can use or images that you can show to the students. Just like that, even for poetry, if you're looking for something in poetry, you will use the same process of opening Teachopia, going to the content tab on the bottom of the screen, selecting the grades, selecting the subject, and selecting the chapter relevant, selecting the relevant poetry item, and you will again be greeted with chunk 1, chunk 2, and chunk 3, and chunk 4, depending on the length of the lesson plan or the length of the chapter itself, or length of the prose or the poetry itself. And you can again always use the additional audiovisual resources that you find there, or explainer videos that you find there, which will help either the students to learn more about the concept by watching that video. With that, we are concluding this first webinar of Shikshana Sambrama English of 2024 and 25. I hope all the ideas and the activities that we have shared will be something that you can take to your classrooms. Moreover, I request all teachers to take these ideas as encouragement for you to create your own activities for your own students in your classrooms. And please send us your activities by either sharing it here in the next webinar, in the next session, or typing it out and sharing with us. That will be instructed to you once again. But thank you all teachers. You have been a wonderful audience. This is us signing off from this side. Thank you.
Thank you, teachers.